Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into a brilliant 11th century Chinese innovation that completely rewired how humanity thinks about value, trade, and, well, trust. I mean, we use it every single day, right? We base our entire lives around it. But we rarely stop to think about how incredibly weird it is that we trade our time, our sweat, and our labor for little rectangular pieces of paper. Let's get right into it.
Seriously, why do we trust thin pieces of paper or, let's be honest, increasingly just digital pixels on a screen instead of heavy gold and silver? Just imagine for a second that you had to carry your entire life savings in heavy metallic coins just to go down to the market and buy your weekly groceries. Think about the literal physical weight of your wealth just dragging you down. That sounds like a massive logistical nightmare, doesn't it? Well, for a long time, that wasn't some fun thought experiment. That was just reality.
Section 1. The Burden of Bronze, 11th Century China.
So, to understand how we escaped that super heavy reality, we have to transport ourselves all the way back to 11th century China, right in the middle of the Song Dynasty. This was an era of just booming commercial growth and incredible economic expansion. But ironically, that massive economic success actually created a debilitating physical problem. You see, the economy was running primarily on metallic monies, mainly these heavy bronze coins. And when trade is booming, transporting huge quantities of bronze is costly, it's incredibly slow, and it's highly vulnerable to theft on the open road. The very tools of commerce were literally holding commerce back. They needed an elegant solution, something lightweight, easy to carry, fast, and safe. So let's look at exactly where that came from.
Section 2. Sichuan's Paper Solution. Enter the fintech disruptors of their era. Around the year 994 in the Sichuan region of China, a group of incredibly forward-thinking merchants decided they had absolutely had enough of hauling around literal tons of heavy bronze. They needed a workaround, a way to conduct large-scale business without all that heavy lifting. And their solution? The Jiaozi, widely considered the world's first paper money. Now, it didn't start out as money in the way a king or emperor decrees it, right? It started out simply as a deposit receipt. Basically, a merchant would leave their heavy metallic coins at a trusted deposit house and receive a paper document in return. Very quickly, people realized it was just infinitely easier to trade the paper receipts directly with one another rather than constantly going back to redeem them for the heavy bronze.
If these 11th century merchants were standing on a stage today, pitching this thing like a modern tech CEO unveiling a revolutionary new smartphone, here would be their key specs. Feature 1, it's significantly lighter and way easier to carry than metallic coins. Feature 2, it's far less vulnerable to theft or loss. And Feature 3, it boasts incredible network effects, being accepted over long distances between merchants. It was a total game changer. I mean, it completely solved the bronze problem overnight.
Section 3. Scaling up. Imperial regulation.
But you know how it goes. Whenever an innovation becomes too successful, the authorities eventually take notice. What started as this decentralized, private merchant innovation organically shifted into a state-regulated system. The Song Dynasty recognized the massive economic power, and for sure the potential risks, of this merchant-created tool, and they decided it was time to step in. The imperial authority began to gradually regulate the issuance of the Jiaozi. Ultimately, this led to a strict imperial monopoly, where the state took over the printing and distribution of paper money entirely. They realized that controlling the currency was a profound way to manage the state's resources and consolidate power.
Section 4. The Inflation Crisis. The Bubble Bursts.
And here is where we run into a timeless economic trap. When you build a financial system purely on confidence, without fixed metal reserves to back it up, you're basically building a house of cards. And unfortunately for the Song Dynasty, that house was waiting to fall. You see, the imperial Jiaozi became a fiat currency. This means the paper itself has zero intrinsic value. Its entire worth is guaranteed solely by the public's confidence in the issuing state. If that confidence breaks, the value of the money instantly drops to zero.
And wouldn't you know it, that is exactly what happened. It established a pattern that we've seen repeated throughout history. The imperial authorities needed more money, so they simply printed more notes. But they didn't have the fixed metallic reserves to back those new notes up. The result? Massively high inflation and a devastating total loss of confidence. The whole system crashed because the public finally realized the paper was, ultimately, just paper.
Section 5. Marco Polo's Discovery.
Yet, despite these cycles of inflation and crisis, the core concept of paper money actually survived and evolved. To really grasp how revolutionary this idea was, we need to shift our perspective a bit to the 13th century, along the Silk Road, and look at it through the eyes of a complete outsider visiting the court of the Mongol Emperor Kublai Khan. That outsider was the famous Venetian merchant Marco Polo. He wrote, with just absolute fascination, that pieces of paper perform the role of gold. This brilliantly illustrates how entirely alien and almost magical this whole system seemed to a European. Back in Europe, wealth was still firmly, stubbornly tethered to the intrinsic value of physical gold and silver. The idea that a sovereign could just stamp value onto the bark of a mulberry tree was completely mind-blowing to him.
Section 6. The Modern Legacy.
It actually took Europe centuries to finally catch up to what Marco Polo saw in China. Mentalities were just too deeply attached to precious metals. But eventually, the idea did migrate westward, and it formed the very foundation of the modern economy that you and I live in today. We can connect the dots directly through time. We start in 994 with the Sichuan Jiaozi. In the 13th century, Marco Polo brings the concept back to a highly skeptical West. Jump to 1661, and we see Europe's first real attempt, when Sweden's Bank of Stockholm issued notes. But guess what? Just like the Song Dynasty, they printed way more notes than they had in metallic reserves. Confidence collapsed, the bank failed, and the founder was literally thrown in prison. It wasn't until the 18th and 19th centuries that central banks finally stabilized the system. And that unbroken chain of innovation leads us straight to the 21st century, moving from paper fiat to bank cards, mobile payments, and now digital crypto assets.
Which brings us to a final lingering question I want to leave you with today. Money has always really just been a technology of trust. From the heavy bronze coins to the paper jiaozi of the 11th century, all the way to the digital ledgers glowing in our smartphones right now. As we fully transition from physical paper to invisible digital code, what will be the next evolution of our trust in money? When you tap your phone to pay for your coffee tomorrow morning, remember, you are actively participating in a 1,000-year-old financial experiment that started with a group of tired merchants in Sichuan, China. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.